We're talking about AWS certification today in the AWS Developers Podcast, and more specifically, the AWS Architect Pro certification. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining the AWS Developers Podcast. We're available on all your podcast applications, Spotify, Deezer, on YouTube, also on Apple Podcast. Every Friday morning, just subscribe so you can receive the new downloads automatically, and you have something to listen during the weekend. We are going to talk about AWS certification in this episode, and more specifically, as I said in the introduction, the Architect Pro certification with Patrick Sarr. You're based in Belgium. You're a solution architect working with financial services. Patrick, thank you for being here. You recently wrote a book, How to Get Prepared for the Architect Pro certification. But before getting into the preparation stage, maybe what is or what are the AWS certifications?
Hello, Sebastian. Thank you for the invitation. And indeed, yeah, AWS certifications are there to validate professionals' knowledge and skills and experience about certain topics. So you will find certifications related to developers, related to architects, related to data engineers and analysts, related to machine learning professionals. And so there are different levels in those certifications, from the more basic introductory certifications, I would say, up to the professional and specialist certifications.
And that's the one we are going to talk about today. The Architect Associate, the first level of Architect, is probably one of the first AWS certification cloud engineers are going to tackle. I'm not talking about the cloud practitioner, which is really for everybody. What is a certification exam? You have to go in person to a certification center and then answer a couple of questions about AWS services?
So you have the choice today. So initially that was the case. You could only go to specific centers where you would sit in a booth for a number of time and have just one screen in front of you, a pen and a piece of paper next to you.
Yeah, and all the rest is locked.
Exactly, all the rest is locked away. And you would answer a bunch of questions, usually tens of questions for a number of time. There you also have the option to do it online. So you could sit quietly at home in the office, and of course the same rules apply. So someone will control that your environment, that within your reach, you don't have anything such as a phone, any other computer, tablet, books, papers, or whatnot. And you would take the exam online in a browser. So it's entirely up to you. The questions are exactly the same. The exams are the same.
It's just the same exam, either online or physical, which brings a bit more flexibility, I guess, if you can do that online as well. So we said there are different specialties, or like architect, sysadmin, and so on, developers. And for each of them, there is an associate level and a pro level. In this episode, we're more going to talk about the pro level, because that's the book you wrote about, how to get prepared for the pro architect. But if you have to explain in 2 minutes, what are the difference between the associate level and the pro level?
So the first difference is the target. Say the target candidate varies from the associate to the professional level. So for the associate certification, what we expect is someone who has already maybe something like a year experience working with AWS, designing cloud solutions and things like that, using AWS services. Whereas for the professional certification, what we expect is someone with at least 2 years of experience and addressing usually more complex solutions, being able to showcase some advanced design skills based on the AWS Well-Architected Framework, which is the centerpiece of knowledge for all AWS best practices, essentially.
I took a couple of pro level certification years ago. They have expired now. Technically, I'm not certified anymore as we speak. One of the main difference I remember is that the associate level questions are relatively short, about one service, and you have 3 or 4 different options in 1 or 2 lines. But with the pro certification, the questions are so long and it's more complex. It has multiple services that are interacting together. And I remember that just reading the question sometimes it's
Right.
daunting. It's time consuming.
Yes, that can be intimidating at first. It's true. That's precisely the difference in terms of questions, in terms of content of the exam. So usually, there's a number of questions. There's a difference in the number of questions. So for the essay associate, I think you have something like 65 questions that you need to answer, and you have about a bit more than 2 hours. I think it's 130 minutes. For the essay pro, you have 75 questions to answer, and you have 3 hours, 180 minutes.
3 hours. Wow.
3 hours, and that's really 3 intense hours, if I recall. If you got
yes, I remember that.
exams I took, that requires really a lot of focus for 3 hours.
I remember getting out of the examination room and being totally wasted. I couldn't do anything more. My brain exploded. Again, just reading the question, understanding the questions. What are the testing domain? What are we going to test from your knowledge? So you said already it's testing more like a practical approach. I think you need to have practiced AWS to pass this type of certification. The associate, maybe someone which is skilled at studying, like a student, for example, or something that was at university recently, can still study and pass the associate level without really having hands-on on AWS. With the pro, that's not the case. You need to be a practitioner.
So with the essay pro, it's expected that you are a practitioner. There might be, if you study enough, long enough, and deeply enough, all the well-architected framework documents, all the white papers, it might be that you're able to pass it. Nevertheless, it's still going to be very, very, very tough if you don't have any experience. So it's really expected you to have already a number of years of experience in the domain. And
what are the domains? What are the domains that we are being tested on? So you mentioned the well-architected framework, but what's the type of what's the scope? Should we know everything about AWS?
Oh, no, you don't have to know everything, luckily. But there are 4 main domains that gather the content of the exam, and there are basically the 4 large categories of activities that you, as an essay, will face in your daily job. So the first domain is about designing solutions for organizational complexity. So you deal with, how do I set up network connectivity strategies? How do I prescribe controls for security aspects? How do I design reliable and resilient architectures? How do I design a multi-account AWS environment? And also, how do you do so, taking into account cost optimization aspects as well?
So that's typically everything from the low-level network layer, like how to set up a transit gateway across multiple accounts and multiple regions, to a control center, and how to implement SCP, service control policies.
In control tower, absolutely.
In control tower.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. But that's not something you can learn. If you're a hobbyist working on your individual AWS account, that's the type of service you will never see. It's only services used by enterprises.
Indeed, that's expected. Expected to be so.
So that's the first pillar.
That's the first one. Yeah. The second one is designing for new solutions. So you start from a blank page. You have a business objective, and that is set up in front of you. Some business requirements are laid out for you, and you need to design a solution to meet those business requirements. So how do you do so? Ensuring whichever business continuity requirements you may have, whichever security requirements you may have. How do you meet the reliability requirements, all the expectations from your customer? How do you meet their performance objectives? And also, how do you do so, keeping in mind that you need to optimize for cost as well? So having a frugal approach in your design.
Yeah, cost is one of the ET, like security,
Yes.
availability. There is no ET for cost, but conceptually there is one. That was one
Yeah,
of the message of Werner Vogel during the last keynote at
absolutely.
reInvent
Yeah.
as well. Third pillar.
So the third pillar is starting from an existing baseline. So you have an existing solution, and you are there to make sure that you continuously improve the solution. Because over time, things will change. Your first of all, the environment in which your solution evolves will change. Maybe you will have more incoming requests. Maybe you have different requirements from the business. But also AWS keeps introducing new solutions, new services, new features. So you need to keep up to date with those to make sure that your solution remains optimal for your business objectives. So it will be looking after operational aspects, how to make sure that you meet operational excellence, keeping in mind the security objectives that you have. How do you maintain security over time? New risks, new attacks. What do you do for those? And so on and so forth for all the pillars of the well-architected framework. So how do you keep meeting your performance objective, reliability objectives, and cost optimization objectives, of course.
So that pillar cover aspects such as observability, monitoring, but also security. So I guess services like guard duty, like detective is something you have to understand and know before you go to the exam.
Yep.
And the last and fourth pillar?
Last and fourth pillar is about migration and modernization of workloads. So you start from maybe a workload that you have on premises. Your intention is to move that workload either progressively or once or at once to the cloud. So how do you tackle this? What are the different migration steps that you need to understand? What is the optimal migration approach? Do you need to do just a lift and shift? Do you need to re-architect solution? Do you need to choose a path in between? So it's about the 7 R's that we look at in the migration journey, and determining also opportunities that you may have simply to modernize an existing workload, how to bring some enhancements specifically for the cloud, using the various AWS services that exist. So for instance, imagine having, starting from a database that you manage on-prem and moving to a managed service, managed database service such as RDS or the likes.
So it talks about data migration services, probably some VMware capabilities as well to migrate existing workloads. Serverless maybe for the refactoring and how to migrate to a serverless solution on container or native with Lambda. The scope is quite large. So there is nothing specific to data management. I mean, there is another exam for that, like the big data exam for AI, ML. There is another exam for that. Something that I remember as well, there is no need to remember service limits or numbers that can change over time. The exams are written in such a way they should be able to live a couple of months or years without being rewritten. And we already discussed a bit about the type of question, saying it's very long, but can we go into maybe one specific example question? And we are not going to disclose anything secret here because there are example questions that are available on the AWS website. So how is the question structured, the type of answers that are proposed, and when I'm a customer in front of that question and all the possible answer, how can I analyze the question, the possible answer, to guess or to select the correct answer?
Right. So first of all, you have two types of questions in the exam. So you have what we call the standard multiple choice. So you have the one correct answer and three incorrect ones. So you have to choose one, but you among four, but you have three distractors. Distractors can be really, really distracting. So usually, well, we'll see how to deal with it in a moment. So the second type is you could have multiple responses as well. So it's again multiple choice, but there could be two or more valid answers. So usually you have to pick two or more among 5 or 6 possible answers. And again, with distractors, of course.
But there is no trick there. We tell you if you have to select 2 or select 3. We tell you precisely how much you must select.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's very clear. It's either one answer or multiple answer, and there is no surprise. There is no negative point for a wrong answer, correct?
No negative point. So it's worth noting that you should answer all the questions because you're not penalized if you get it wrong, but you don't get any point if you don't answer a question. So it's even if you guess because you have no clue of the correct answer, it's better guessing because you still get the chance to get started.
You don't know. Sometimes it works. We might be lucky. So what's the structure of a question and its answers?
So the structure of a question, as you initially mentioned, are usually very long for the essay pro exam. It can vary. Can vary, but indeed there's usually a context that is described at first, and it can take a few lines. Sometimes you have between the context and the questions themselves. The whole thing can take an A4, the equivalent of a letter on A4 page.
For one question.
For one question. Wow. So they're not all the same, but some can be that long.
Okay.
Including the answers. So usually the way to proceed is, of course, thoroughly read the question to really understand the different aspects. Try to pinpoint some elements that indicate mandatory elements that are expected in the solution. There are words like should or only or things that you need to really pay attention to.
Or the most cost-effective solution.
Yes. Adjectives that describe and the attributes that describe what is expected in the solution. And then also read thoroughly all the different answers and try to first identify those that are not a good match. Even if you think that you already have the right solution, try to discard first the most obvious distractors. Sometimes it's, because you know a service and you know it's not a good, what is proposed in the solution is definitely not a good fit for what is required. So you can already easily discard one or maybe two answers already. And then you can focus on the remaining proposed answers.
Can we say that usually there is one answer which is obviously wrong? At least it's in the associate. It's like that. In the pro, is it like that as well?
Yes, usually it's maybe less obvious, but usually yes, there is one that you can normally spot relatively quickly and say, well, it's not answering within the scope of the question, is going beyond, or it's not really targeting the question.
And then for the remaining ones, sometimes it's just one word difference. And you really have to pay attention to say, sometimes you read the two answers, you say, but it's the same thing. And then you read again, and then, no, there is one word of difference.
Yes, so sometimes, there can be descriptions in the answers like at least, I don't know, deploy a solution in at least 2 availability zones or in at most 2 availability zones. So those words make a big difference. So pay attention to these, indeed.
Where can we find a sample question? There are a few on the website.
Yes, there are a few. Okay. I think there are about 10 sample questions that are proposed on the AWS Essay Pro public website.
And you don't have to search for it. You just scroll down your podcast application. In the notes of this episode, you will find all the links to the website of the certification itself, how to take an appointment, and how to get prepared, and the book that Patrick wrote.
Right.
So all the links are there in your podcast application.
So if you want, we can take an example. One of those.
Let's go. We have a bit of time.
Questions. So I'm gonna pick this one, which is description is not too long, and so it's easier because you obviously don't see the question on your screen. So the discussion is about you have a team that is building an HTML form that is hosted on a public Amazon S3 bucket. The form uses JavaScript to post data to an Amazon API gateway endpoint, and the API endpoint is integrated with AWS Lambda functions. The team has tested each method in the API gateway console and has received valid responses. Now, which combination of steps must the team complete so that the form can successfully post to the API endpoint and receive a valid response? And you are supposed to select 2 answers. So I'm going to read.
2 answers out of
5. So there are 5 possible answers.
I expect something around course.
Exactly.
Intuitively. Okay, go ahead for the first answer.
The first answer A is configure the S3 bucket to allow cross-origin resource sharing, of course. Answer B is host the form on Amazon EC2 rather than on Amazon S3.
Okay.
Answer C is request a quota increase for API gateway. Answer D is enable cross-origin resource sharing course in API gateway this time. And answer E is configure the S3 bucket for web hosting.
Okay. And we have to select 2 answers, you said?
And you have to select 2 answers.
Okay, let me go through that by memory. I don't have the text in front of me as well. So the obvious distractor here, the one that we can eliminate immediately, is hosting the form on EC2, and that's not part of the original scenario. It doesn't bring anything.
Correct.
So let's remove that one. One of them we need to do, even without talking about course, if we host files, HTML files on an S3 bucket, and we don't use CloudFront, which is not part of this answer, is to activate the website serving option on the bucket and turn on. So that's probably one of the
yes.
2.
Yep.
One is about, and then, so we still have three options. What is about increasing quota? I eliminated that one.
Right.
And there are 2 others, which is enabling course, so cross-origin. What's the acronym for course? I always forgot. Cross-origin
resource sharing.
That allows a browser to access an API on a different host name or domain name than the page that is coming from.
Right.
And the 2 options is to enable course on S3 or to enable course on API gateway.
Indeed.
That's one of these 2
yes.
for sure. And I cannot get it wrong here. It's my reputation as the podcast host that is on play. I would say to enable it. So the browser will download on the S3 bucket.
So in this case, you have to go back to the architecture of the solution. So the solution goes, so first you have an API gateway that sits in front of everything, and then you have the S3 bucket. So actually, you expect the requests going through the API gateway to be able to access resources on S3. So in this case, because this is the way, this is the flow.
What do you mean? The page is served by the API gateway itself? No.
Yes, so that's what, so let me take the description. So the form uses JavaScript to post data to an Amazon. Oh no, so that's the other one, my bad. So the form is loaded from the S3 bucket on the page on the S3 bucket, and then needs to to reach out to call the API gateway endpoint.
So in that case, the answer coming from S3 must have the HTTP header, the coarse HTTP header that will allow the JavaScript to call the API gateway. So I would say the correct answer is turn on coarse on the S3 bucket.
So in this case, actually, the thing is, because from the S3 by the page also on the S3 bucket needs to be given access to call the API gateway. It is the API gateway that must allow calls support. And so in that case, you need to give calls support, to enable call support on the API.
Level.
Yeah.
You see, even on the question that looks simple like that, there is discussion and debate and subtleties that we really need to understand and to know.
But your approach was correct. I mean, you identified correctly the two obvious distractors, and then you have one answer was obviously the correct one, because you need to provide public access to that page, and then there is you need to make the choice between two that are less obvious, but then you need to read again the question, try to figure out. You usually have a piece of paper and a pen, so you can, if you need to draw something to better understand the architecture, you can do so. That can help.
I think in the user interface for the questions, there is the possibility to mark a question as well, like a draft, so you can come back to it later. If you still have time later, that's another problem, is time management. But if you have time, you can come back to a question that you mark after.
But time, if I may say about time, something that is worth noting is that if you're a non-native English speaker, you are entitled to an extra time of 30 minutes for the exam. So it's something that you need to specify before you actually register for the exam. You can ask for a 30-minute accommodation on the website where you register for take the exam, and that gives you. This is really useful. I found it very useful when I took the exam, to have that extra time to read again. To go through maybe questions like you said, where you were not sure, you picked an answer, but you marked it for later, for review later, and that's something that extra time can be very useful for.
Yeah, keep an eye on the clock when you're passing the exam, because sometimes you have to count for, you said 70 questions, you have
35 questions, 3 hours, so it's less than 3 minutes per question, so it's between 2 and 3 minutes per question, so you cannot stay 10 minutes on a question. It's not, don't do it.
How to get prepared? Obviously, there is one solution: buy a book, and you have the links to Amazon.com. The book is called AWS Certified Solution Architect Professional Exam Guide. The practical skills, knowledge, and confidence to ace the AWS exam on your first attempt. It's written by you and Johan Wadia, and the editor is Pac T. So what is in that book?
So basically, in that book, we designed it to be a faithful match for the exam domain, so that it's clear for the reader how exactly each topic maps onto the contents covered in the exam. But it's also a guide to take you through not the very basic concepts, although we recall them at least at the beginning of the book. But we expect people to have already some knowledge about AWS, so we start from a more advanced level, but we go through every domain and every activity in each domain, every task that is expected to be covered by the exam in some details to give you enough confidence on each of the domains. And because it's not possible to cover everything from A to Z in a single book, we also point additional resources. There is in each chapter a further reading section, which points you towards the well-architected framework sections that are relevant, the white papers that could be relevant, the documentation from AWS that might be relevant, any resource that you could use to basically complete the reading. And you're well encouraged to do so, because reading the book alone is not enough. You need you recalled it at the beginning. You are supposed to be an experienced practitioner already, having possibly at least 2 years of experience on the solutions architect. And then, well, further reading is also necessary. Complete the reading of the book by looking at the resources that are pointed out. There is also something worth noting, free exam preparation course on Skill Builder. So on AWS Skill Builder, you can create an account. It's entirely free. You have resources. You have hundreds of free courses that you can follow. And one of them is to help you get prepared for the exam. So it will also go through the different domains and give you some additional tips.
Yeah, so that you know what to expect the day you're in front of the screen and the question. So listening to this podcast episode alone is not enough to get ready for that certification for sure. Reading the book is a good start, but you say it's not enough. You must spend time to do additional reading, additional research, practice, well understand these different pillars and these different domain. Based on your experience, how much time it requires to get prepared? Of course, it will depend on the starting point. If you're a fresh junior out of university, or if you have 20 years of experience managing infrastructure, it's not the same. But for someone that works professionally with AWS, someone that listens to us, works in a bank, for example, or in an enterprise managing semi-complex architecture with multiple accounts, multiple regions, is it a matter of studying 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 months, 1 year? What's the order of magnitude?
It's hard to say. It really depends on everyone.
How much it took you?
So the first time I took it, I think it took me probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks studying most nonstop after work, of course, but looking at everything. At the time there was no book, so you had to go through the Well-Architected Framework, documentation, the white papers, go through the AWS documentation, and also go through. What I definitely recommend is take some practice exams. So there are some practice exams. Some can be found online, free of charge. There is one proposed by AWS for a small fee. I think it's something like $10 that you need to pay, small fee compared to the exam cost itself. It's worth taking because that will give you a good view of where you stand compared to with regard to different domains of the exam. If you, I don't know, for instance, you take the practice exam and you'll score something like 60%, it's an alarm bell that you need to study more because we didn't speak about it, but to pass the exam, you need to get at least a score of 75. Wow. 75%. So it's so I would consider that if you take a practice exam and you score less than 80%, keep studying a bit. I mean, usually those exams are calibrated.
The same complexity?
It's a comparable complexity, and they will also tell you, okay, which domain in particular, how much you scored in each domain, and so you can see your gaps. You can identify, okay, that those domains I did well, this domain not so well, and I need to study more on that particular aspect. So,
do you know if there is any course as well online, such as on Coursera or Cloud Academy, to get prepared for this certification exam?
There used to be one on previously ex-Cloud Guru, so I think it's Coursera now. I believe there used to be one. I haven't checked it in a long time, so I don't know if it's.
I'll do my
I suppose it's still there.
And put the links of whatever I find. It will be in the links in the notes of this podcast. If you have to give a general advice, like tips and tricks, no, there is no tricks. You need to know your thing, but a general advice to get prepared.
Try to be methodic. Try to be as exhaustive as possible. So it's look at the different domains of the exam. They are described in relatively great details in the exam guideline, the official exam guideline. So you can rather quickly identify the topics that you're familiar with and those that you're not so much knowledgeable about. And so focus on those first. Try to deepen your knowledge in the where you identify gaps, and then try to keep practicing, reading about not just what you don't know about, but also what you know, because from what you've learned initially to the moment you take the exams, things have changed, new features have come up, new services. So you might not know about every new aspect of the services that are part of the exam. And also look at the list. So there is a list on the official website
Of all the domains.
that's on top of the domains also list the different services that are in scope and those that are not, that are out of scope.
That's important to know.
Yes.
what I will not be asked about.
Yeah, so something like what is it, Game Lift or the gaming service is not part of the exam.
Bedrock.
Yeah, you don't expect. Maybe you will have generic questions about those services, but don't expect deep questions about data analytics or machine learning. Also.
AWS Certified Solution Architect Professional Exam Guide. Gain the practical skills, knowledge, and confidence to ace the AWS exam on your first attempt by Johan Wadia and you, Patrick Sarr, published by PACT. That's the good starting point. Maybe a last question, because we have still 2-3 minutes left. How did you get involved into such a project, writing a book about exam certification, and not any exam certification? I mean, a pro level. Why? How?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I noted when I prepared, because along the past 6 years that I've been at AWS, I took and passed a number of certifications. I think the most I had at some point were 8 certifications. So for some of them, there was explicit official guidelines and material, so like a book. The network specialty had a book. Maybe the security specialty, I think, also had a book. But for instance, for SA Pro, there was nothing. So when I took it the first time was really hard. And I thought, well, this is something that could really benefit from having not just the few pages of the official guidelines, but a proper book to help you in the study. So at some point, PACT reached out. So an editor from PACT just contacted me out of the blue. I think it was on LinkedIn, and asking me if I was interested to write a book for them. And I said, well, depending on the topic, yeah, of course, that could be interesting. And when they mentioned the SA Pro, my first reaction was, wow, okay, that's going to be a tough one, but a challenging one, but at least something that is really missing. And so it made sense to actually say yes and join it. And also at the time, so when I started was a bit more than 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago. And I felt that I accumulated enough experience and knowledge about the topic that I could feel relatively at ease writing about it. I would still need to study and explore, of course, areas that because I'm not going to say I knew everything from day one on every topic in the book. I needed to explore further some of the areas, but at least I felt comfortable with most of it. So,
how long was this project? Over a year, I guess.
Oh, it took over 2 years. It took 2 years. That was a long work.
And your co-author is a bit more experienced than you. I'm just browsing his books on Amazon, and there's the AWS Administration Guides, the Mastering AWS Lambda, another edition of the AWS Administrative, the definition. AWS Administration, the definitive guide. So he went through that already before.
So indeed, so that was the idea in bringing Johan on board, because at some point, I felt that. The editor wanted me to go faster, but I couldn't move fast enough to their expectations. So what I proposed is, okay, let me bring someone else, a co-author, on board. And I knew Noan from the office, and I knew he already wrote some books for them. So I felt, okay, it's going to be easier that way because, well, we already know each other. And I know Johan, so I knew he was capable of doing it. So it definitely helped me go to the finish line faster.
To finish this quite impressive project, actually, in 2 years of works on top of your daily work at AWS, of course.
It was not a full-time job yet.
That's a massive project. Thank you, Patrick, for having explained how to get prepared for the AWS Architect certification professional level, and about that book that you wrote to help candidates to get prepared as well. As usual, all the links to everything we talk about, course, sample questions, registration, the book, are in the notes of this podcast. Thank you for having listened this episode until the end. Next week we are going to talk about something totally different. It will be about identity center and single sign-on, and why it matters for you as a developer as well. That will be for next week in all your podcast application for Friday. But now, go build.